Hello students, and welcome to today's lesson on compound statements. Our objective today is that we will write compounding conditional statements using journal notes and practice problems. So first off, we need to talk about what compound statements are. Yesterday we learned a lot about conditional statements, which have the structure if P, or if the hypothesis, then Q, or the conclusion. So what we'll see today is that our hypothesis and conclusion, our P and Q, we're still going to keep using them, but now we're going to use them in different types of sentences. So we're really good at conditional statements at this point, and now we're going to talk about a compound statement. So a compound statement is simply a statement that is made of two or more components. And you might say, Mr. Fox, well, we already learned about a statement that is made of two or more components, and that was our conditional statements, and you're right. A conditional statement is a type of compound statement, but they're very special, so we talk about them by themselves. Our two main compound statements that we're going to talk about today are the conjunction and the disjunction. And those are some big fancy words for something that's actually kind of simple. Conjunction means and. Disjunction means or. And we use a variety of symbols for this. So I'm going to go ahead and define a P and Q here to help us kind of get an idea of how this works. So conjunction means and the way that I would write it is P and Q. So this would read as P and Q, or in the case of our examples over here, I study hard and I sleep enough. I study hard and I sleep enough. All right, so what we can say about conjunction is that conjunction is only true when both P, Q are true. Disjunction, or, we can say P or Q. So this is read as P or Q. Or I could write this with our example as I study hard or I sleep enough. And disjunction will be true if one of them is true. So we say that this is true when either statement is true. So conjunction is really hard to make true because both things have to be true. Whereas disjunction is really easy to make true because either one could be true and therefore the disjunction would be true. Alright, so again, let's do some examples to see how this actually works. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not doing examples quite yet. So we can see how that's going to get really messy really fast. And first off, I want to talk about my negation again. Remember that negation is the opposite of a statement, or the not. So if we use our P, and remember from yesterday we had this symbol, not P would be written as, I don't want to use this symbol because we've used it for other things. So not P would translate to I do not study hard. So that not is super important. So I'm going to just say it again, right? We have that symbol which can be not, and this symbol which can be not. And those will be very important later. Alright, so now let's talk about how we're going to solve a lot of our problems. So we're going to solve a lot of our problems using something called a truth table, which makes it a lot easier to look at all of these different true and false. Alright, so given that we have some P and some Q, then a truth table allows us to see how those different truth values are going to interact with each other in compound statements. So, if we have P or Q, and we know that previously Q and P are both going to be true, then Q or P will also be true. Because the only requirement for OR is that at least one of those statements is true. So then we have P and Q, and we see that true, and we know that the condition for and to be true, or my conjunction to be true, is that both statements are true. So then again, my and is going to be true. So then we look at our next line. So this was our first example, and our second example is here. So we look at our next line, and we have P is false, and Q is true. So then we go to P or Q, and we know that the condition for P or Q to be true is that at least one of them is true. Therefore, P or Q will be true. But when we come to P and Q, we know that both statements have to be true. Therefore, we have a false here, and so P and Q will be false. So the truth table is just a way for us to be able to easily identify the truth values of our statements without having to think about them as much. So let's see how truth tables are really helpful to us. So one thing that we can do is we can create this table, which will be immensely helpful to us. So if we're asked to evaluate multiple different ways that a compound statement might be formed, making a truth table is the easiest way to do that. So we know that P is true. We know that Q is false. So then we know that not P, well, if P was true, then not P is false. And, oh, I'm sorry, I wrote a Q back here. That should be a false for Q. And we know that not Q is going to be true, because Q was originally false. So we say P and not Q. Well, now, instead of having to think about the statements themselves, we go here, we look at P, and we go here and we look at not Q, and we can write that both of them are true, and we know that conjunction requires that both statements are true to be true. Therefore, my conjunction of P and not Q is true. Next is going to be P or Q. So again, let's change our colors here, and let's take a look. Well, I've got P, that's going to be true. I've got Q, which is false. But this is OR, so I only need at least one of them to be true for it to be true. Therefore, P or Q is true. And now we can think about P and Q. So now we're going back to the original P and Q. And what we see here is we have P, we have Q. That's true and false, but it's P and, or conjunction, Q. And we know that conjunction requires both of them to be true for it to hold. Therefore, I have a false on Q, and so this is going to be false. So that's a pretty simple truth table. You guys are going to see some more complex ones in your notes, and the reason that we use the table is because then you can do a lot of different statements rapidly. So that's kind of what we're going towards here. Alright, so for your reflection, I want you to think about what is the difference between the compound statements that we've seen and the conditional statements that we learned yesterday. And remember what I said earlier in the video about conditional statements. If you have any questions, please let me know. When you're done with your reflection, let me know so that I can stamp it. When you're done, you'll have an assignment, which you should have picked up when you came in the door. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you later. Goodbye.